Great crowds accompanied Jesus on his way. Great crowds, big crowds. Whilst community, unity, and coexistence are great things to be sought after and great things to be lived, there's also a dark side of crowds. We can reflect a little bit this morning perhaps on the destructive power of the crowd. Whilst crowds can get us together, have us sharing, have us enjoying together and supporting each other, crowds also have the potential to smother our individuality. Crowds have the potential to strangle our own thinking, our own free will, our own personal determination. And this can result in the crowd directing and energizing everything we do, rather than us thinking and choosing, rather than us using the powers of our being to direct our own life, being swept up in the power of the crowd. We're all wary of the realities of peer pressure. We know what peer pressure is. And in an age when so many of our peers live as though God does not exist, we are aware of the pressure of the crowd making us walk away from Jesus, taking us away from him. But we hear in the gospel today a great crowd accompanied Jesus. And as this great crowd accompanied him, he turns to them and he challenges them. And in this challenge, he doesn't warn them of the crowd taking them away from him, but the opposite. He warns them of the danger of them only being with him because they're swept up with the crowd. Only being with him because they're swept up with their crowd. Their accompanying of him along his way to Jerusalem is not the result of a well thought out, reasoned and personal choice leading to a committed discipleship, but rather they're just along for the ride. The crowd in the gospel today draws people to get close to this famous guy called Jesus who's causing a real stir in Galilee. It allows them, let's go join this big crowd and be close to him and watch what he's doing and figure out where he's going. But it also stops them from getting too close to him. The crowd stops them from getting too close to him, that it would actually result in being in personal relationship with him. All the little parables and sayings of Jesus in today's gospel are his attempt to try and elicit that personal and individual commitment necessary for true friendship with him. He sees the crowd following him, and he sees they're people full of all sort of motives, there for all sort of interests, and they could follow him for months and months and months and never meet him. So he turns to them and challenges them. Why are you here? And each of those hard sayings we hear in the gospel are his attempt to try and gain a personal commitment, an individual choice for Jesus. If any man does not hate his own life, he cannot be my disciple. If anyone does not carry his cross, he cannot be my disciple. None of you can be my disciple unless he gives up all his possessions. Very forceful, very startling, very confusing and challenging sayings from Jesus there. And what he's doing is he's causing that crowd to wake up, to think, to deeply think, to wrestle personally with Jesus' challenge and say, how do I live these words? If Jesus doesn't ask those questions, then the crowd just follows along, just humming along. We have those two other shorter parables in the gospel that are a little less known, a little less quoted because they're a little bit confusing. We have the first of the person building a tower and Jesus saying, well, before building a tower, building a structure, prudence demands that you sit down and you count the cost and you budget well to save the embarrassment of failing. And then the similar way, the king who's being attacked, before he goes out to war, he counts his troops, counts the other side's troops, carefully considers the odds, thinks, what am I going to have to do to win? And makes his decision based on all that careful consideration. Jesus gives us these two parables because he's asking us to do the same with our spiritual life, to do the same with our relationship with him, to take the time to personally think about the cost of discipleship, to think about the cost of following him, and allow that personal time of consideration, to allow that deep thinking and reflection to produce in us a genuinely personal decision to follow him. Not a decision being swept up in the crowd, but a genuinely personal decision. It's sort of like Jesus saying we can't be his disciples by testing the water. It's either all in or all out. And he's laying down that challenge in all the words of the gospel today. Being Catholic because the crowd is Catholic is not so much a problem today as it was perhaps 50 or 60 years ago. The crowds, the majority of people aren't practicing their faith. Many people can look back and say, I was only Catholic because my family was, or I only went to Mass because everyone else was going. But there's been a death of cultural Catholicism. There's been a death of cultural Catholicism in the last 50 or 60 years, where the saying, I'm Catholic because everyone else is Catholic around me, isn't really a phenomenon anymore. But the spiritual danger hasn't gone away. It's just become more subtle. We must be aware of the subtle spiritual danger of being part of the Catholic crowd, being part of the Catholic mob, allowing us to get close to Jesus in a superficial way, but stopping us from getting too close to him that we know him and love him personally. We can't find our Christian identity. We can't find the basis of our relationship with Jesus simply because I'm part of this group or that group. But there needs to be a personal relationship. This can be a significant problem in our Catholic institutions. Our Catholic institutions, very well resourced and very large, have the tremendous potential to do such great things in fostering the relationship with Jesus. But the dark side is people falling into the mentality that I'm part of this school or I'm part of that group and I'm part of that crowd, and because I'm part of that, I automatically have a relationship with Jesus. Because I'm part of that crowd or connected to that institution, I'm connected to Jesus without any personal commitment, without any personal interest at all. There are two ways, I'll finish with this now, there are two ways where we could be like the sensible builder of the tower or the king of the army in Jesus' parables and choose him personally. Personal prayer and personal faith formation. Personal prayer and personal faith formation. One way to live that individual relationship with Christ and safeguarding us falling into just being part of the crowd going along following Jesus is to pray personally every day. To pray a little bit, whether it be in the morning or in the evening, whether we prefer to pray a little bit all throughout the day, whether we like to use the scriptures or the rosary, any form of prayer, but individual personal prayer with Christ, one-to-one, heart-to-heart. That's not the prayer of the crowd just following along. That's the prayer of a committed disciple, a committed friend. If the only place we can pray is here, and if the only place we do pray is here, then we have to ask ourselves, am I following that personal commitment to Christ? Am I fostering that personal relationship? The other, personal faith formation. Asking our own questions and seeking the answers. Looking for a deeper understanding of what we believe. Coming to a deeper knowledge of Christ and his mysteries. To take the time to sit and consider carefully. Why does the church teach that? What does that actually mean? Why do we do this at Mass? I don't really understand this teaching. Why do we do that practice? We're all full of all of these questions. And one way of not just following along with the crowd, but coming to a deep personal decision for Christ, is to seek the answers to those questions, to come to believe in the truth of the answers, and to live that truth. We are so blessed with incredible opportunities in this day and age to be inundated with tremendous resources to learn more about our faith, to come to that personal knowledge and conviction of it. We hear in the book of Revelation, "After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude, a great crowd, which no man could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God, who sits upon the throne, and to the Lamb.'" This is the great crowd of heaven. It's the great crowd of the saints. St. John has a vision of them. That's the crowd we want to be part of. Not the crowd that blindly follows, but the crowd of saints who have personally decided to know Christ, have personally decided to love him.